Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast for Backlot Banter, where we review every single Palme d'Or winner. And while we're in the middle of the Cannes Film Festival right now, we are going back to the year 1993 to talk about that year's winner, which would be Farewell, My Concubine, directed by Chen Kaige. And, this is a Chinese epic movie. Takes place over a long time over, if you recall, way back a couple years ago, to our discussion of Bernardo Bertolucci, The Last Emperor, the same time period.
Don't remind me. The only Quest video I am not on.
Oh
my God.
That's a sore spot. Only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Tanner wakes up in the middle of the night in cold sweat. His eyes jolt up. He's like, oh my God, there's a Quest video I'm not on.
The Child Emperor ice cream.
So we are going to stick around in that 20th century big giant broad paintbrush strokes of Chinese history, educate ourselves a little bit, but focus in on the opera, because that's what this movie is about. Or maybe not. I don't know. Tanner's going to tell us in a moment after we get through some housekeeping, and then we can talk about the film.
It's definitely about the opera.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out right now. It's definitely about the opera.
It's about characters who are actors in an opera.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Last week we talked about a film that was also World War II, broad strokes of history going up to the 90s, kind of underground Serbia, Yugoslav. It was a fascinating discussion, a fascinating movie, very fun watch, and a very fun episode. And all of that evidence panned out in the score, because Underground got an 8.9 out of 10, putting it at spot number 8 on the list, top 10. A new entry there, cracking the very best of our list. Today, though, we will be deciding on the 47th film on the list. And so, without any further ado, Abram, I hear you've done some reportage on our comment section this week, wandered out into the wasteland, and I don't know, you have some catches to bring back.
I do. I have some catches. I have some minnows here, right? But maybe we got a big. What do you catch? Like a big marlin? That's a big fish.
That is a very big fish.
Ocean sunfish.
Oh, but what you got to do is you got to use those minnows as bait for the big catch.
It's like Qui-Gon says, right? There's always a bigger fish. You got to escalate, right?
It's like Qui-Gon says.
Folks, we gotta get some more comments in this comment section. We're thin on the ground, but we're not.
Maybe we reviewed movies that people had heard of. Maybe they'd be more willing to comment.
Maybe they should familiarize themselves with this fucking canon of film. How about that?
Huh? It's only like the second film festival of the world.
Maybe they didn't have such a goddamn Eurocentric view of the fucking world. Well, that movie is also a movie.
This movie is from
Underground.
Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking about Shohat and Stom. There's a little intro to film theory reference for folks. Leave in the comments if you know what I meant by that.
Hey, shout out.
Again, we're thin on in intellectual richness, but we're not thin on heart in the comments section, because friend of the show, best profile picture in the game, Jay Galindo, is back once again on the Underground review, saying, I wanted to see the movie before you guys posted the review because I wanted to comment something related to it. I appreciate the effort, but the follow-through...
yes.
I got distracted watching the Final Destination Mission Impossible movies. I'm so sorry.
Hey, that happens. Happens to the best of us.
Mm-hmm. Jay Galindo, let's do this then. I once had an endeavor with our good friend John Tour 11. I sent him on a mission to watch all the Star Wars movies. Jay Galindo, let me know now. Here's your mission. What do you think of Mission Impossible? Thank you. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Mission Impossible 2? I don't really care what your thoughts on the rest of them are. I want to know your thoughts on Mission Impossible 2. John knows Mission Impossible 2. Okay, then the other thing we're going to shout out here.
Hang on, Jay Galindo. This message will explode in roughly an hour and 10 minutes. I'm going to call my shot here.
Wait, but he's not watching this live.
Oh, yeah, he is.
No.
He'll never stand a chance.
And then we also, Raina Harper, of course. Shout out Raina, as always. Raina says... Abram has the heart of a lion and a lifetime ban from the zoo. Now, Tanner.
Yes.
What does this mean here?
So when we were talking about something that you were being courageous doing in the previous episode, in the Underground episode, and I said you have a lion's heart, saying that you were courageous, and that is, I believe, what Raina is riffing on here.
Raina followed up by saying it's a joke about literally taking the heart from a lion opposed to just a figure of speech. I would never do that.
That's true. That's true.
I might.
Abram is a friend to animals.
I'm a friend to animals. It's like I was you know when Netflix like goes to sleep and it like pops up things you can watch?
Yeah.
It popped up pig, and one of the 3 descriptions was animal friends.
Oh,
And-
well, he is a friend of animals in that. And more animal revenge seeking, I would say, but
Sure.
Very interesting.
That
Wanna
is
talk
the
about a movie?
That's the report on the ground. We also, we got to hold ourselves accountable here. 1317 TM also told us that we said the director's name wrong, and we are sorry. It's pronounced.
here we go.
Oh no.
We still can't do it right.
They really just
Skurica?
capitalized.
It's not helpful.
I believe it's Emil Costa Rica. I believe it's Emil Costa Rica.
'Cause
Costa Rica. Well,
I can't do it. We'll circle back to
buckle
this
yourselves in for a lot of pronunciation foibles because we here have
We-
an even greater challenge, I might say, this
Okay,
week.
one.
thank
We
you for
did
the-
practice. We did practice.
Thank you for the message, Abram. I'm going to circle back right now. I'm going to say it's Kusturica. I'm going to say there's a t right there. A t.
Kusturica, that makes a lot more sense. I felt very put on the spot by 1317 TM, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Classic
Yes,
Follow
question
your
here.
footsteps.
yeah.
I'm still
Let's-
learning. I'm still learning English.
Mhm. We're
Let's
doing
get this boat moving on, steaming a little bit towards our destination. Tanner, would you
Yes.
give us a little plot description of this movie, Farewell, My Concubine?
Absolutely. So this is a film that concerns 2 characters, characters named Da Yi and Xiao Lo. And Da Yi and Xiao Lo are actors. They come into an opera school, an acting school, if you will, as young boys who are yearning to be in the opera. This school is, of course, very abusive, very harsh, very cruel, but imparts in them the importance of acting and the Chinese opera and these grand traditions of these performances. And so they hold these performances very near and dear to their hearts. And as they age into becoming quite respected actors, at least in the Peking opera, the specific sort of area that they reside in. And this is 20th century China. We are going through a lot of power changes, a lot of regime changes in this time. We're going through World War II. We're going through the Maoist Revolution, the Cultural Revolution. Our characters are riding all of these things out as they traverse their relationship with the opera itself, but also perhaps more importantly, the relationship they have with each other. It is charged in a number of ways, romantically and professionally, and how those things interweave, and ultimately leads to a tragic betrayal as they are sort of forced out of the opera, out of their positions of power by the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, I want to say. And then we get a little bit of an epilogue in the 70s, 80s, maybe.
77.
77. That is them doing their performance one last time and bringing all of this pent up sort of tension between them over the course of decades really comes to a head and a tragic ending as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ooh, he's picking.
Ooh,
The wheel is spinning in his head.
Tucker, you called attention to yourself. What did you think of
Oh,
this
shit! You never do that,
Class
folks.
Class clown speaking up. That's what he gets.
one? Called on first.
What do I think of this movie? Is that the question?
That's the
Yeah.
question. If
Okay,
you could
just
imagine it, yeah.
Yeah, just checking. I was so impressed by this movie. I think this is one of the strongest directorial visions I've ever seen in a movie, from its cultural specificness and its commitment to representation of the Peking opera. I mean, that's something I know nothing about and have never seen before, and watching it be so lovingly and excruciatingly portrayed in this movie was intoxicating to me. I think the performances are excellent. I think the way that it taught me, as someone who was unfamiliar with Chinese history, something about the different eras, but it balanced that very nicely with there's a politics and there's the cultural changes and everything, but it balances that very nicely through a really understandable and focused character dynamic, very personal character dynamic. And so I get the best of both worlds in this. I get to learn about the large-scale history and culture of China, a place that I've never been and am largely disconnected from. But also I get to focus in on characters that I find very, very compelling. And also just from a historical and cultural point of view, when I mentioned it being a very specific and impressive directorial vision, Chen Kaige, the director, makes this movie as a response to him having to out his own father during the communist revolution. And so like there's this really personal energy there that I think really, really comes through. I think it's gorgeous. I think the music is excellent. The performances are excellent. I was blown away and incredibly, incredibly engaged for the entire 3-hour runtime. I think it's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Tanner, what did you think?
This is a terrific film we've stumbled upon here yet again, gentlemen.
How did we find it? People got to learn about this movie.
That's right. No, I mean it is a like super solid ironclad love triangle in a lot of ways that is far more interconnected and complicated than the love triangles we typically see in film. There are so many underlying or subtextual connections between these characters because we get to see so many years of their lives that each interaction comes with its own sense of intense richness and things going on in the machinations in the minds of the characters and of the creators of this film. It's extremely personal, as Tucker just touched on, of course. And yeah, it's extremely sumptuous and moves lightly through these and quickly through these cultural moments, these historical moments, but also imparts important messages and thematic through lines as to how they connect the moments to our characters and how they want to change and want to stay the same during all of these things. It's a fascinating, beautiful movie that is also like a technical achievement in so many regards.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Abram, we're gonna go around the horn here. What did you think?
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this film a lot. I really like what you were saying, Tucker, about this sort of dual concept, this very personal narrative, but also this larger political one. And I think why it ends up working so well is that using the history of the opera and the culture of the arts and the intersection with politics as a prism into this very tumultuous generation for the people of China it was really amazing, and I think a really great way to keep me engaged and keep me really in step with how the culture of China was changing from period to period, because I could anchor that to the movements in the opera and the interplay with the opera. And I really love that. I also found myself just like you, Tucker, feeling just like a student of a period of history and culture in the world that I too, particularly this period in Chinese history, I have very little familiarity with.
Yeah,
and
they're big on the
it's
1700s in China.
Yes, that's exactly what I meant. And it's a similar praise as I offered to Underground last week. Again, whenever a film like this really gets me excited to learn, it succeeds for me. But I think really the element of Concubine that I find the most interesting and really to me illustrates the depth and mastery and precision of the screenplay and the performance is the really transgressive gender politics and sexual politics of the film. And I think that really rests on the shoulders of DE. And I think the performance of DE is just outstanding. I think it really is one of the outstanding performances I feel like I've ever seen. And so I think to capture so many dimensions, this cultural dimension, political dimension, artistic dimension, and then this also gendered sexual dimension is really it feels impossible to have all this in the film, and none of us even mentioned obviously the technical excellence of the work either. So yeah, I really have no great criticism of the film.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm quite as hot as all of y'all are on it. I definitely enjoyed it and find it very interesting to think about. And like you say, Abram, the learning aspects of it, the fact that this movie really places you in, at least for four white boys like us, a very foreign environment, and then beyond that, a very foreign kind of art form in this, getting to see our main characters evolve from childhood and from this I'm still very struck by the imagery of this film, and this like cycle of abuse is kind of the main thing that points out to me that's
Yeah.
about. But like you guys say, we got world politics, we got world wars, we got all these different phases of culture in China that we get to see pretty clearly. I mean, we see it
Yeah.
in the mise en scène, in our costumes, in our photography, the way the time of day and the place that things happen in. It's all very, very interesting. I found myself a little bit struggling to connect to the like plot motions in the later part of the film.
Yeah.
But I am not really going to blame the movie on that, because I think that's more on the me fault side of
On
things.
that guy
But
sitting in the chair right there.
this here chair. There's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about in this one, and so I'm looking forward to that and hearing the things that you bring up, and I'll sprinkle in my thoughts as I do.
Okay.
Per usual here, because I've got quite a few. Good, a little boring for me. A little bit more boring, or at least it didn't grab me as much as The Last Emperor did. I think the film I'm gonna compare
Which
this
was, of
to.
course, iconically the boring line.
The
for
boring
so long.
line, but
It was,
remember,
you're right.
But I
What a
always
throwback that is.
I always said the things that went below it were boring, and the things that went above it were not. So hard to say what The Last
Operated in some
Emperor
sort of
really
gray
was.
area,
It was
you know?
Schrodinger's boring.
Uh-huh.
That's not how Schrodinger's cat works.
Tucker, what
Yes.
discussion area should we begin with? One of the characters or the setting or whatnot?
I think we should start with the opera, because I think that this is the element that ties together all three of the core things that make this movie stand out. It's the opera in the center, and it's how the opera relates to history and politics, how the opera relates to the characters, and how the opera relates to the production design. And so that's the identity of this movie to me, is being able to tie all of the themes of all of these things that could be perceived as very disparate together with a core concept, which is, what is the Peking opera like? How do people perceive it? How does it impact our characters? And then what does it look like on stage? I think is a masterstroke of what this story, how the bones of story is told on, because it is a perfect dramatic vehicle, and obviously that's just like inherently true with the concept of the opera, but the way that they portray the Peking opera in this as a very storied element of Chinese culture,
Time honored, these iconic roles that these like children are being brought up and trained to embody.
Yeah, exactly. And the movie hits you with that from the very beginning, opening with the grueling process that it is quote unquote required for these actors to go through in order to perform at the level where they're going to receive national recognition. And I found, because I'm not a theater guy, and I'm not especially not a live performance fan just in general, and I don't particularly have a connection to theatricality when it comes to stage performance. One iconic thing about me and Quest is that Shakespearean dialogue performances are something I'm very averse to. But I do think that the extreme foreignness to me of the way the Peking opera is culturally operated and then portrayed on stage was almost surrealist to me. And I found it just incredibly fascinating to watch. And then, of course, throughout the movie, get kind of used to. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but for the first few times I saw these performances, I couldn't quite tell how I felt about it or what the goal of these actors were. But once we've seen like this set of scenes from this in our world and also quote unquote in universe play of Farewell My Concubine, or opera of Farewell My Concubine, I really got adapted to this style. And so then when they start to crack or be impacted by different elements emotionally or with opium addiction or things, I was so used to how it was supposed to be, I could tell that things were going wrong. And that is
Sure.
that is a stroke of the screenplay, having it be so focused on this one thing. Of course, the performances, being able to adapt on the fly between the real life and the play life. But I just think that the opera and this Pharaoh My Concubine opera that we are continually referencing back to and seeing throughout the ages is the most fascinating element of this movie to me, and everything ties back to it.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
You say
It's the knot at the center of
it's
this
the
movie.
identity of the movie. It's the namesake of the movie. It's and it's I'm Tucker. I'm glad that you started here because it's where I also wanted to start, because it's the first like. Oh, thank you. Yeah, yes. It's the first like overarching like incisive thought that I had while watching this movie is when we're doing the training. I forget the name of the main teacher of this, academy, school, whatever it is. When he is telling them the story of Pharaoh My
Master
Concubine.
Guam.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When he is telling them the story of Pharaoh My Concubine for the first time, and he tells them what it's about, and that was the first moment of disconnect for me, where I was like, I don't think that to my ear that does not sound like what this story is about. Because he told, it's the story of a great general who has a fall from grace, and his horse and he wants to die alone and in poverty, or with nothing essentially. He tries to get his horse to run away. His horse won't run away. He tries to get his his concubine, his wife, to leave him. She won't. And she ultimately does this final dance for him and slits her throat with his sword to be with him in her final moments as well. And then Master Guan, right, Tucker?
Guan, yeah.
Guan says that it is a story about how we are in charge of our own fate. And I'm like, that does not sound like what that story you just told is about. If anything, it's the exact opposite. It's how we can try to direct our fate in certain ways, but ultimately it is the people around us that are driving our life. It is the larger context of the world that decides our fate. We are just a mere character in it, no matter if we are the most powerful general in China or a young impoverished orphan boy in an opera academy. It's the world around us that directs our fate, and that is exactly what this movie is about as well. Like, you can try to drive your life in certain ways, but ultimately the waves of the world are much heavier than whatever sway you may have. I mean, that is up until you have to try and cut ties with the people that you have in your life, and that is large. That is also in this film forced on by the ways of the world, the ways of China, the Maoist revolution. Basically entices or perhaps forces a betrayal of all of our characters amongst themselves, which I find super fascinating. But yeah, I wanted to just get that out there. I was like, the movie presents it very interestingly, and I don't know if any of you other guys had that read of like this teacher. I feel like he is not imparting the correct lesson, the correct moral of the story, especially if he's a character that we're not especially supposed to like, if I may be so bold.
Abram, you look ready. Go ahead there.
Abram, the opera.
Oh, very good.
Proceed.
There's a moment early in the film where Di Yi, we know him as Diuzi, early as a child. He ends up at a performance of the opera, and I remember that's sort of the moment for me where I found myself really becoming captivated by the film, because I think the way that the performers were moving was amazing. The way that as they're somersaulting and they're performing, they almost feel like they hang for a second in the air. It's beautiful.
Like the one guy that somersaults in place. He like flips and flips, and he doesn't move front to back. He just keeps doing it.
Yeah, I can do that. I'm not going to show you, but I can do it.
I trust him. I believe him. I've never seen him do it, but I believe him.
Tucker, I've seen him do it. Tucker's just very modest.
Oh, look at that guy.
Whoa. I think that
this is now an 18+ episode.
Quest After Dark.
I think one of the strengths of the directorial hand and the the lens in this film is it often leaves space for the opera to simply be amazing because it is. And I think that even when we're seeing this performance, and in the foreground of the frame we have the back of the front rows of the audience's head, it's beautiful. And I think that the beauty and the grace and the very meticulous attention to detail, I think about Master Yuan and his repeated refrain of questioning Zhao Lo about the number of steps he should be taking to his concubine. I think that the beauty of the opera, what juxtaposed against the intense violence of the beginning of the film, for me was incredibly important for capturing me as an audience member. And I think it sort of immediately instilled a couple things in me that were important through the end of the film. And I think most importantly is this sort of feeling of tradition. And I think that the tradition of the opera storylines, the tradition of the movements, the tradition of the costuming, it all clicked for me quite early. And I agree, this to me is one of the strongest elements of the film. And I think that the way that, broadly speaking, even beyond the earliest section, which is the most oppressive in tone, the way that the film is able to dance between the beauty and the pain behind that beauty, whether it's the throes of opium addiction or the political upheaval and revolution, is really important. And those two sides of the film are I think why I really ended up enjoying it as much as I did.
I think to the scene that another one beyond that takes place a little bit after it's the scene in which the troupe kind of has to sell to Master Yuan, right? And Doji Die ends up not doing it right. He has this line, which is the line that I think interconnects the opera with our gender politics line, in which he reverses it because the character says, I have the soul of a boy. I am not a girl.
I am by nature. The character is supposed to say, I am by nature a girl, not a boy.
And he flips it. So he says it wrong in the
in his audition, basically.
Yeah, it's like in an audition for
audition.
Yeah. And so that sets up for me a very interesting character note, because I think, about our character's self-representation and the fact that we actually, by virtue of spending so much time watching opera, we actually learn about Die as the character that he portrays, almost, at least in my feelings, as equally as his real life persona.
Easily.
And so I think this question of like, am I by nature a boy or a girl, and then using that line to flip it around, puts us in a very interesting place for Die to express his
Die, by the way. You're getting the two vowels mixed up. Die.
Die. He struggles with representing himself, representing the character. How much do we blend them? And later on down the film, I think it's really interesting to see the physical performance of our actor combine both of these kind of elements. This, like, that kid, the orphan, from poverty, not really orphan, we see his mother, but then to see him kind of incorporate some of these very theatrical and smooth, the Concubine Yu's character in the play, in the opera, has this very defined sense of movement, and so does the king. But we don't see Zhao Lo really embody this kind of character outside in the dressing room, or when they're having all these
conversations. He's got a good work-life balance. Yeah, he does not.
No.
Well,
that's really what this movie's about.
It's about work-life balance.
So that audition, let's put it, scene, and then in which Zhao Lo then goes in and like messes up his mouth. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing. He takes the opium pipe and he shoves it in there and he wang jangles it all around.
He cracks his teeth and shit.
Yeah, he busts his teeth up, and then they perform, and like the whole troupe gets the inspiration to do it, and at that point, Die goes, and nails it. And they get hired,
Yeah.
and it's the beginning of the whole. It's it's close to the beginning of their career. Ye has to be sexually
the start
assaulted
of their career.
Yeah,
because
They get
the
cast
selling
off
of
of
his-
that, and then we do a time jump.
yes, yeah,
the uncomfortable part about watching, particularly Dia Yi, grow into a respected actor is that what we see, especially in the first, let's just say 5 years, I don't know, about of his
Stardom.
growth as an actor, is that it is these moments of sexual exploitation that are
Mhm.
what
hmm
in the film pushes him to take that next step and be more focused on the performance. That moment with the opium pipe is very
Yeah.
interesting because it leaves his mouth bloody, and it is like an assault on him sexually, ostensibly, and that then, like, quote unquote rape is then pushes him to understand himself as like a woman, ostensibly, because that's when he like understands the role better and doesn't mess up the line. And then of course it's after he nails it and then he gets actually raped by the old man, the eunuch, that's when the career starts. And so it creates this really uncomfortable tension as a viewer where we've been with
Yeah.
this character since childhood and seen their innocence be taken away. But the system is designed through how grueling it is to, in some ways, or at least for this character, require these moments of pain to result in the skill that he ends up developing.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
it's
uncomfortable.
also because Jia Yi is trained in the feminine role. He is trained
Mhm.
Yeah.
to specifically and seemingly only play
Yeah.
the character of Concubine Yu.
No, there are other plays that he knows, other operas that he knows. Because they talk about, like, in the trials, like, oh, he performed a couple other ones. We don't
Mhm.
really see those.
Yeah.
but he is trained in most importantly in like the feminine type role.
Mhm.
Like that is the type
Yeah.
that is the actor that he is. He plays the woman in all of these shows. And yeah, that Tucker, you're right. In this scene where I believe the character, the eunuch's name is Zhang. They like, oh, this is like a ritual. This is like a tradition that we have.
Yeah.
It's a
Mhm.
tradition that we have that like the actor, the young boy who plays the concubine, goes in with Zhang and it gets molested every single time. Like it is ingrained in the system of these things. You know, it is very
Hmm.
it reminds you about like systemized violence in Hollywood
Yeah.
and like
Well-
the ways in which people in power, like disgusting men in power, require these things of, or used to, or maybe potentially still do, require these things of particularly young women, but also young men, and like
Mhm.
taking advantage of them, trying to work their way up in the the ladder of fame and fortune and everything like that, and the things that are taken from them in their pursuit, their earnest, genuine pursuit of like acting and the method and the form and art and everything like that. The things that are extracted by the systems of power, the capitalist systems, even maybe even not monetarily, but power. The power dynamic is perhaps more important there.
I think
Hmm.
it's interesting to note that we are talking about this thing that they call in the movie the old system. They have they call the old system and the new system, and I think there's a lot to be gleaned from examining our different modes of oppression, because I think the mode of oppression changes over the course of the film, and at this early childhood stage it's a corporeal and a sexual oppression. Like, it's the physical beatings, and then it's the sexual violence, and later on in the film we have this kind of in the middle section before the Civil War ousts the Kuomintang. They're like humiliating to the theater, the performers. And then we go on to the communists, and we have the Cultural Revolution, and that has this very intense political violence of the meetings and the denouncements and the chants and like that.
Yeah.
The ways in which our main characters are constantly yelled at, told they're doing nothing right, or pushed away from being accepted changes throughout the film, and it changes with the system of the societal system that they're operating in.
Yeah.
I find it.
I especially love the way that the people that watch the operas, their reactions change over the
Oh, yeah,
course of
yeah.
these decades. That is one of the best visual representations to understand how the culture has shifted and its perspective on these performances, and then by extension traditionalism, right? So at the very beginning we have that scene that Abram mentioned of the characters as children watching the opera and tears streaming down their faces. It's so impactful and inspiring to them. And then we see
Well,
a
sort
couple
of.
other
The other
performances.
one of them is crying because he's like, how many more beatings
fine.
do I have to take in order to be
Oh,
that
sure.
good?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very,
But the
it's a
room-
much more complicated than just like, I'm inspired to go and be an opera
Yeah.
performer. That's part of it,
Well,
for
the-
sure.
For DIE it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The
For him, it's-
auditorium itself in that opening scene is also like crammed, crowded, everyone just smashed into any small space that they can get. Whereas scenes following that, I think there probably is one in between that I'm forgetting, but the first big change that I recall is when the Japanese army is occupying China and they're watching this performance and they're sat in very
Perfect
regimented
rows.
rows, militaristic, of course.
Yeah. And then we
and-
see the communists watching it and being
Mhm.
rowdy, and then we see like upper class Chinese people or the commanders of the Japanese army watching it and like very politely clapping,
Yes,
like
yep.
taking off the gloves to clap. And I love the way that we get to see these different rooms and the amount of people in them and the way they're reacting and acting during the performances. Of course, there's the one when the communist members like swarm the stage, like
Yep.
that repetition of watching the opera happen, and every time, or in large part, Diayi and Jiao are performing the exact same scene, but then the people react to it differently, and the mise-en-scène and the amount of smoke in the air and the color palette of the room is just slightly different, and so it gives you a sense of what is staying the same, the traditionalism, the core of Peking opera, and then the people around it are what has changed and how culture views it.
Diayi is staying the same. He is
very
always
the
the
same.
presence on stage that is being celebrated and continuing the performance in lieu of or in spite of the rowdiness of the crowd or anything like that, up until they actually storm the stage, of course. But
Yeah.
like,
And then he gets replaced.
Exactly, he gets replaced. But yeah, when the Japanese army, they also get kind of rowdy as well. But Yi like continues performing through it and earns the respect of this Japanese general sitting up in the wings and stuff like that.
Yeah. Mhm.
He and like that sort of all goes back to what we were talking about with Yi's character and this early transformation for him born out of the several instances of sexual abuse that he underwent. That like. He became aligned with the character of Concubine Yu. He cannot separate himself, and it becomes the opera itself and the character is a safe space for him. It is an area of comfort where he is allowed to embrace the femininity in his personality, his own sexuality. He is allowed to embrace all of that. Whereas it is being shunned in basically every other aspect of his life. And the character of Master Yuan is also pretty interesting because he's introduced as sort of perhaps an underhanded, maybe manipulative or insidious character, but also becomes a confidant of the people in the opera. He is a patron of the arts. Yeah, exactly. And also a sexual partner for Diayi.
Yeah. There's somewhere I was going. I just lost my thought here.
You lost your train of thought here?
I'll help you. The opera.
The opera. Yes, of course.
I think for me, one of the most interesting things to follow, sort of thinking more about the way you're calling attention to the people around the Peking opera changing, is I think also the value it holds for them.
Yep.
I think that's a really important trajectory, and and I think it's really made quite interesting by the moment when Zhao Si replaces Dai Yi
Yeah.
to play Concubine Yu, because we hear Zhao through a curtain, and the performance sounds quite identical.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we
There
come
are
to
definitely moments when the two of them are dressed up as Concubine Yu. I
they're
can't tell who's who.
interchangeable.
You can't tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all.
That was a shocking moment, by the way, when there's
Yeah.
like two people dressed in that insane outfit. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, whoa.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's interesting because we're ascribing through the eyes of GE this very personal significance to this role that is in many ways far beyond him, right? We come to learn that he is famous and he commands the attention of somebody like Yuan, but it's more that the role does, and it's
Sure.
more that I think about the moment when GE is on trial, and part of Yuan's statement on his behalf is that the idea that calling these shows pornographic
Mhm.
is an assault to the national identity. It's
Mhm.
interesting because we follow this movement of this classic opera, which then gets put into conversation against modern opera as this thing that holds significance for our troupe, but is 100% at the whims of not just the people, but the value that they tie to it.
Mhm.
And I think that is, again, it returns to my point from earlier. And obviously, this is adapted from a book, so a lot of the credit needs to also go to the original author. But
Right.
tying the relationship that opera has to the changing cultural climate of China is so effective, because
Yeah.
the opposition we find ourselves in between modern opera being about the laborer, the story of the
Mhm.
laborer, and the classical opera being about the story of the dynasty, really highlights for me again this real faceless, intergenerational, larger than life nature of these narratives. And
Sure.
again, and it made me think about the fact that GE and Xiao Lo came from extreme poverty,
Mhm.
and so to accost the narratives is to think nothing of the lives of the performers
Mhm.
and the labor and physical pain they went through for those roles.
Yeah.
So I think the film is
It's all
yeah.
about the story being told. That is the only thing that concerns the audience, and the story
Yeah.
being told should be about the laboring masses and not these fanciful rulers of old.
Exactly,
Mhm.
and I think that is again in the nuance that the film presents. We come to learn through those crowds that indeed this performance is sacred, but to who, and
Mhm.
and what happens when it's no longer sacred to the members
Yeah.
of the crowd. I think that adds a very intriguing dimension to the beauty and craft of the show.
Yeah. Well, let's take to expand on that. We can take our three political ideologies that are represented that are watching the opera. And so we've got the imperialists in Japan, and then we've got the nationalists in the Chinese government before or during the Civil War. It's the what would become Taiwan is the nationalists. And then you have the communists. And so the imperialists are quite happy to perform, and to watch the performance. They support it, and so are the nationalists. They're a little bit more begrudging because of this history with the Japanese, but they come around to seeing the value in the opera through its national identity and this piece of like national pride, and like this is from our history, and that aligns very well with like nationalist thinking. If you're trying to make a nationalist movement about you really do honor this kind of stuff. And then you have the communists who, like you guys have said, are not about this, are really radically changing up society, and they go after Master Yuan because it's not explained. Or it's either not explained or I missed it. What Yuan has actually done to be in his position of power. He's obviously rich. He's obviously
Yeah, I don't know.
powerful. we don't really see it, and so we're left to.
Everyone's got an idea.
Well, I mean, yeah, they talk about it again edgewise. We don't see a particular act, but he is very friendly with the occupying Chinese military because it's Yuan who we see when if I remember correctly, Ji when he's performing for the Japanese soldiers, Yuan is up above. He is keeping the theater open and he is interacting with the occupying Japanese army, which is obviously anathema to the values of the party that ousts them, because that's obviously also what GE gets arrested for.
Yeah.
It just takes longer for it to reach Yuan when his sort of sphere of influence is diminished to where his money and status can't protect him or the other people anymore.
Yeah, when it's not valued anymore, essentially.
Yeah. That is a really fascinating idea of like where the value lies for our characters, or I think more for our political trends. I think our characters themselves, the values that they have, it's like, well, I actually
they are
like.
Not.
I don't have
characters. I'm sorry, you.
I have a hard time believing that Ji actually is invested and loves the opera beyond that it's just what he's always done and that he had no choice and that he did all this work to practice and that it's what he can do. Well, maybe
how would you prove that though?
Maybe
I
Zhao Lo is a bit more representative of that, because later on in the film he is disbarred from performing and he's very lost in his identity.
That's all I know how to do. I don't know what the fuck you want me to do.
What were you gonna put there, Tanner?
I thought you were going to go with Dai Yi is not motivated by political alignment. And I would say that really kind of goes for all three of our main characters here, whom we should talk about because they're
we got to get to this love
the most
triangle.
Important character. Exactly. But like they're not motivated by the politics of whatever era they are in. I mean, there are specific lines to this effect. One of which I really like that I wrote down. Even communists need the opera. We're just waiting to see what their money looks like. Love that line. But yeah,
the thought that goes through my head, and this is a very I'm on Twitter a lot. Thought is that my political alignment is whatever this is, and it's just the pecking opera.
Sure. Yes. I mean, exactly. That is what is most important to Jia Yi. Of course, it is his entire identity as has been imparted into him at a young age. But like for Zhao Lo, it's all he knows how to do. He doesn't know how to do anything else, which is much closer to what you were talking about, Timo. And then you have Yoxian, who comes into this narrative a little bit later, and is really only concerned with being with Zhao Lo, with trying to steer him away or towards the opera as things change and as the world changes around them. But like what's most important to these three characters is each other, and whether or not they want to be with someone or get away from someone or get one of the others away from someone. That is like what is important to these three, and everything else we've been talking about is just happening on the periphery and is influencing their lives in ways that they cannot control.
Yeah.
We even have GE, he says on trial that he hates the Japanese, but they were going to bring the Peking opera to Japan.
Yeah.
And that to him was most important. And that in some way earns them a degree of respect to where he's not willing to lie. He'd rather just be killed.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting because another complication I would add to your picture of Zhao Lo is that when he's smashing all the shit in his house, after he's decided to go have this quiet life, it's not that he doesn't know how to do these things, but he specifically calls out a couple sort of common traits. I forget what they are.
Yeah.
And says he can't. What do you want me to do? You think I'm going to go become A or become B?
Yeah, there is a bit of like pretension to what he's saying there. He's like, I'm a high society guy. I can't just go out and be a day laborer now.
Well, and I think that's an important point because Zhu Xian is unable to rise above her position. She will always
as they say.
Yeah, she will always be this top woman at the House of Blossoms.
Yes.
And we return to this across the narrative. Whereas with GE, whose mother was also
Prostitute.
a prostitute, he was able to rise above many things and become this transcendent character.
Mhm.
Again, in a film that is then very concerned with a sense of class solidarity and a youth revolution along the lines of class. I think that the class mobility of GE early as it relates to the opera, and then Zhu Xian's inability to ever be perceived as anything but a prostitute or
Yeah.
insert
Yeah.
worse name is intrinsically important to her character and to the interpersonal dynamic here, particularly at the end of the film.
Mhm.
Yeah, because to tie back to what I was saying at the very beginning, the opera is the core of all of this. And Tanner, I have to disagree with one thing you said, is that with the love triangle, all that matters to these characters is the relationship. With
the
three of
opera
them.
also obviously matters to them.
Well, yes, because what I think is interesting is it's the within each character, the interplay between how much they care about the people or the opera. And it wanes, it waxes and wanes across the course of the narrative. And between the three of them, we have different levels of how much they care about the people versus the opera. And that's what it's a decently compelling love triangle. Of course, it changes its like power dynamics and feelings across the course of the narrative. But then that's also, I think, made even more interesting by the fact this isn't just a romance movie where Jialo and Dia Yi has unrequited love for Jialo, and then there's the relationship with Zhu Xian that is also complicating that. But then there's also, I feel in some way, Dia Yi has the dynamic with these two others, and frankly everyone else in his life, that is primarily for Dia Yi about how it can help him be a performer. I think his dynamic with Jialo is very much about him being the other part of the performing duo.
Yeah,
of course there is
I
a
agree
sexual tension there,
completely.
love there, but it's about if Jialo is not performing with him, even though there's this big scene like where the first like romance scene of the movie is where Dia Yi says like I want to be with you like every bit of my lifetime.
Here we go.
Even
Yeah, I
1
got
second
it.
less is
Yeah.
less.
1 year, 1 month, 1 day makes it less than a lifetime.
Yeah, that like he says that, and it's a powerful moment. But then the moments in which Jialo can't be the king to his concubine, he's out of there. He's like, you know what? Screw you. I'm still gonna go commit to the stage. And there are these moments in their life when they're pushed apart. And so I really like that there is this compelling love triangle. I think the performances are great in each of these moments of romantic and sexual frustration. But then it's the opera that also adds this extra level of texture and motivation to these characters.
Though I would argue that it's all melded together, especially in the mind of Dia Yi.
Tanner?
It's all melted
You know what it's
together.
like?
What's that?
Challengers.
Well, yes, it's the opera is sex, is tennis, is power, is did I miss one? No, I don't think so. But yeah, absolutely. It all becomes melted together, especially for Dia Yi. And yes, there are the moments where Jialo is no longer performing at the opera. But I mean, especially the first time that it happens during the Japanese occupation, what is Dia Yi obsessed with doing? He goes and performs privately for the Japanese military as like a bargaining chip to get Jialo out of there.
Sure.
I mean, there is still that connection, and at times, yes, it is severed, but you always get the feeling that Dia Yi is happiest. He is at his most fulfilled when he is sharing the stage, when he is sharing, as he sees it, really, his only avenue of true expression of life with Jialo.
Yeah.
And he is extremely distressed whenever Jushian is in the picture, whenever she is trying to force Jialo away from him, to take him out of the opera picture as a whole, and also of course makes it the most tragic thing when Jiaso takes over this role. At that point, Dia Yi has nothing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Jiao Si, by the way, but
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So what I like about that is you say that he's that Jia Yi is always like anxious or against what Jushen is how Jushen is interrupting his relationship with Zhao Lo. But what I think is so fascinating about this love triangle is the way it shifts over the course of the narrative.
Absolutely.
Because they also become a weird kind of family.
Yes.
There's the three of them, and there's Zhao Si, and
they're
they have
like
this
adoptive son. Yeah.
But the three of them are this family, and they're all working together with the opera and then teaching other people and having different levels of respect. And then there's these moments where, even though the dynamic is initially set up of the romantic wedge drive between Jialo and Jia Yi is Jushen, but then there's this moment when Jia Yi is going through his opium
withdrawals
treatment, essentially, and Jushen comes in and holds him and is taking care of him. And I'm like, that is a fascinating moment of character progression, because in a much weaker movie, the two characters that are supposed to be very much against each other romantically would not come together and have these tender moments and have these supportive moments. They throughout it's
they're like outside of the purview of their shared romantic interests.
Yeah,
like that moment is not about Zhao Lo. It's not about him. What it is about is Jia Yi's relationship with his mother. When he's going through that, he is having a flashback, a hallucination about his mother. This opening scene that we see of the water is freezing and her chopping off his finger so he can fit in with the rest of the boys at the academy. And you also have to think we pointed out already, Jushin and Jia Yi's mother, both prostitutes. Like, there's a melding of these characters as well. There's a maternal instinct happening here as she wraps him in the blanket and everything. And then she tries it again. This movie's so good. She does it again when he loses the part towards the end of the movie. She puts the robe on him, and then he shuns it off. He throws it off and walks out.
The act of putting someone into costume or into makeup is very much a recurring intimate thing where characters are showing their affection and their connection to one another, and the rejection or accepting of that in those moments is like emblematic of how they're feeling. Again, it's the opera and the relationships.
Jia Yi is often doing his makeup by himself, and when Zhao Lo is doing his makeup by himself at the end of the movie, it's when they're being shunned out into the street and paraded around, and he's putting it on as they're making him put on his makeup as a mockery of the performance.
Also, gotta say, if I had to pick a makeup movie of all time, I think this is probably one of the top 5, because the most striking moment, or one of them for me, was the first time that you see Zhao Lo in the full king makeup that has these
very
eyes that go up and these interesting patterns here and this big beard. He barely even looks human in that full getup, and I was really arrested by the way that looked, and it definitely took some getting used to. But then again, because we see it so many times, you learn to see the ways that the emotion shows on his face. Even though it's supposed to be something that's viewed from far away, we as an audience and through cinematography are given a lot of close-ups of his face through this thick beard and this crazy makeup. It's visually striking, but then also accents his emotion in different ways depending on how much makeup he has on. I think it's remarkable.
I also think about, faces are just very important in this film. And I think about a couple shots early on that made me knew we were watching a heater, where characters are staring not into the lens of the camera, but through the camera. And we're close to faces. And I thought that was a really strong cinematic choice. And to me, it really cued me into faces for the whole rest of the film. And in conjunction with the makeup, I think you pay close attention to them as a result. And I think that, for me, is a perfect opportunity to shout out Leslie Chung, who plays Ji. I think his performance, and actually, to be clear, I'd also like to shout out Ji Yin, I believe is how you say it, who plays the teenage.
Yeah.
Teenage version.
Yeah.
And I think that, first of all, just the continuity in their performances is quite remarkable.
They also look very, very similar.
They look very similar.
Great casting.
But I think that
All three of them actually, because there's a kid
all three of
version as
them.
well.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
Who plays Ming Wei Ma? I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm looking at IMDb.
Young
here.
Dude C, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Damn, you said that letterbox picture of him? Sheesh. Handsome fella.
Handsome
Yeah.
fella.
Oh yeah. Okay.
This is the performance is outstanding. Not only in the ability to be convincing in the tradition of Peking opera, but I also think a lot about the intimacy of this film. I think that the intimacy that actually all of our, I think all three, but I think two moments that really stick out to me are when he's young and he wraps the blanket around the kid, and then they sleep together.
Mhm.
Um, or later when Ji is helping Xiao Lo get his costume on, and then he like tickles him with his arms
Yeah.
wrapped around him
Yeah.
from behind.
Great
Mhm.
moment.
Yeah.
The film is very restrained in the types of intimacy it shows, and I think in some
Yeah.
ways shows these moments of very arresting intimacy, and I really like that, and I think it's sold incredibly well through
What do you
performance.
what do you make then of one of the final moments of intimacy that we see in the film during the thunderstorm, close to the end, where it's Zhao Lo and Zhu Xian, right, in the bedroom together with the mosquito
Yes.
netting as Jie Yi watches?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like that scene, because of how we're using the camera, obviously Ji is a voyeur there,
Mhm.
and we see him through a thin mesh.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we also,
And we don't see his face unless the lightning is striking.
Right.
right,
Very cool.
and we also don't actually see Zhu Xian and Zhao Lo having sex. We see them also through a
Mosquito
veil.
net.
Ooh,
around
you
the
are
bed,
on
yeah.
you are on some media theory. Yeah,
Here we
you're
go.
on- yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going. This is good.
I think
This
that
guy's riffing. This guy's look at him go.
the film, obviously we have these characters who are deeply sexually repressed by the parameters of the culture they're in, and when
Yeah.
there is
And the abuse they've received.
Mhm.
yeah, or when they're perpetrating the abuse, there is a system to that. But even then, we don't really see the act. Obviously, we see the young Juzi getting pinned down, and it's a very violent scene. But then we leave the room,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think
There's
that,
one exception, which is when they go back as adults and Master Guan then again beats them.
Yeah.
Fun fact I learned watching the
Oh, here we go.
making of the actor that plays Xiao Lo, Zhang Fenyi, he actually was beaten. It was his idea. He's like,
Sure.
I'm not going to be able to perform this scene unless you
You went method.
actually
Okay.
beat me. And so
Yeah.
and the director was
Wow.
like, you sure about this? And they like went through with it. But
Yeah.
interesting directorial
Mhm.
and
yeah,
actor performance choice there.
yeah. I just think that the way that particularly Leslie Chun is embodying this repressed sexual life,
Yeah.
this homosexual identity that he can't express, and is a secret, to some extent an open secret in certain sects of this wider community. The way that is reinforced by what the camera chooses to show and how the camera chooses to show it is very interesting. I think it feels almost more transgressive how little we see.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, it's all. We also have to think about like the specific time and place that this film came out of, because of course, it screened at the Cannes Film Festival, but was not available to see in its original form in China for many, many, many years. It was cut down, and even these limited moments, these fleeting moments of intimacy were cut out of the film because because of the censoring, the homosexual activity that is implied by these acts was still too much for the 90s Chinese government that that Kaige was coming out of.
Mhm.
Yeah. What one thing that I want to draw a connection to is, Abram, you mentioning the way that the camera is sometimes placed behind different things and framing our characters' actions in different ways. And there's one repeated camera looking through something element that this movie continues to revisit that I think is absolutely beautiful.
Here we
Can
go.
any of you shout it out off the top of your head?
Oh, now it's a goddamn quiz.
Ring a ding 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 ding.
I don't
It
know.
is the glass pane that has the fish painted on it.
Oh,
and
Oh,
we
sure.
yeah, I mean, there's a
consistently-
yes.
We consistently get these shots of Jie Yi, both actually it's almost every time. I think this is true. I think it's almost every time he's either smoking opium or experiencing the withdrawals of opium.
Yeah,
You see
yeah.
him through this pane of glass that has these bubble fish, the bubble eye goldfish,
And the
yeah,
glass is like
kelp
almost
painted on it.
frosted too. It's very
Yeah,
it is
opaque.
It's contained to like that middle section of the film, but also sometimes you are see because he actually also has a fish bowl in that room,
Mhm.
so sometimes you're cutting and
Oh,
looking at
man.
it through that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, just production design
Yeah,
in this movie.
good stuff.
Those big glass fish bowls with the
Yep.
thing holding them up. The houses that we keep returning to.
yeah.
How lavish the sets are here. I think some of my
Absolutely.
favorite moments of production design are the ways that the alleyways change over the course
Mhm.
of the movie and of course of this history here. We get these moments of the children running down the streets in the alleyways when they're young, which are well decorated, and you get this kind of this is what the alleyways look like in your mind. And then as you revisit it, it's cleaned up a little bit as becomes a nicer area of the city that they live in. And then of course, when the communists are taking over, there's these really colorful posters and papers that are
Mhm.
bright yellows and pinks and blues with beautiful Chinese script like pasted onto them, and they're covering the walls of this. And I'm just like, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And this movie consistently presents you with locations that are oppressively detailed and always manage to be very, very colorful. I love the use of color and bright primary colors in this movie. And of course,
Mhm.
that is the costuming, that is the ways that the buildings are painted. It through its color, and this is something that the few Chinese movies I've seen very much succeed at. They evoke such intense visual emotion from a
Yeah.
viewer because they're unafraid to lean into some sort of surreality with the amount of color that is used.
I mean,
in
yeah,
these
you
places.
look at like the work of like Wong Kar-wai, for example. Oh, Tucker's out of here. He's leaving Quest. Bye bye. You look at like the work of Wong Kar-wai and these guys who came out of this specific like post-cultural revolution film movement in China, and yeah, there's absolutely a connecting factor, especially people point to the color usage, the tint of Wong Kar-wai movies all the goddamn time. There's a discourse on Twitter every 3 months about how X restoration of this Wong Kar-wai movie is like truer to the color palette that he had, and then like Criterion fucked it up or they made it better or something. I don't really know, but yeah, this happens every time because that I don't want to use the word oppressive. Sounds like I'm using it negatively, but I'm not. But like the just the total like dyeing and tinting of these films is extremely important. The color usage is extremely important in these films.
Intense saturation.
Thank you.
But
The
it
intensity
also
of it for sure.
It also is incredibly unsaturated at moments too. It's
Yeah,
almost black and white at a couple parts where
Well, we
yeah,
open
it's
in
literally
black and
black and
white.
white.
Yeah.
well, yeah.
The fade into color is cool, but then at multiple numerous points throughout as well.
That opening scene was literally shot in black and white and then tinted with red,
Yeah.
which is very cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What then? So we're talking about color. You talked about you bringing up the Cultural Revolution and just the mise en scène of that sequence. How much that was cool and visually appealing to you. And I think about just like the throng of people, and that brings me to this final sequence of the film. Well, the second to final one before we go and have the reenactment of the play in real life, wherein we have our three main characters humiliated on parade and being forced to denounce each other. Do you guys what does this final section of their relationship and the ways that the outside forces of the world are coming and crashing in and forcing them to act in certain ways against each other. How do you take all that and square it with the final, well, this cultural revolution sequence?
Yeah, I mean, Tucker mentioned it at the beginning of the movie, but it feels like also very important that we're talking about this, having just talked about Underground, which is a film that is similarly about a lost national identity, a cultural memory of sorts, a recent one at that. The very same goes for this final sequence in Farewell My Concubine. Tucker mentioned, of course, that Kaige outed his own father, reported on his own father as an anti-communist spy in the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and 70s. And they later made up, of course. They later reconciled over that. But
he was involved in the movie. Actually, I think he was like part of the art direction team or something.
His
father was, I believe, a director or a filmmaker of some sort.
Kaige was still like, it's a healing moment for him and an attempt to like heal this cultural moment in Chinese history where neighbor turned on neighbor just because of the fervor of this moment. Is particularly the youth movement of this moment was all about accusations and levying criticisms, and for our characters it means airing out dirty laundry that they perhaps took as just a matter of the fact of life of their friend or their wife or whatever, but using it as weaponry. They're forced to use it as weaponry by the government, by the culture of the time, and cut ties with them in favor of becoming part, of this broader movement, losing their identity of sorts, losing their connection to the people around them, just because they're being threatened. They're being threatened with death, and they're being humiliated, and they're being, all of these sorts of things. And the tragedy of like when, especially Xiaolu is lashing out at Dai Yi and Zhu Xian. You see the pain on their faces as he says that he doesn't love Zhu Xian. I mean, that's a horrible, horrible moment, and it's so well performed by Gong Li. Just looking back at her,
you can also see the moment on the face of hold on, closed it, of Zhang Fengyi, who plays Xiaolu, when he turns on actor mode.
Sure.
When like they're like yelling at him, it's like, tell the story, like speak up, say what you're thinking, and he essentially he locks in and he like turns on this performance mode where he becomes bigger than life, and you can see the like body language and facial expression changes. He's like, I'm going to be protecting myself, but with the thing I know how to do best, which is perform to a crowd and convince these people of an emotion.
Harkens back to that moment that with Jushin where he's like, I don't know how to do anything else.
I think, Tucker, what you're alerting us to is really important, because I would argue that is opera. They're performing opera there.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
They are literally performing. They're performing
playing their role in front of the communist audience. The audience expects one thing, and the performers know how to give it to them.
And they all live. They all survive. They give this for the next scene. They survive into the next scene.
Yes.
And I think that's important, right? Because the film is also, I think, alerting us to. Sorry, I just got a notification that Playboy Cardi posted a new song. Let me rewind my train of thought.
There we go. All right.
I think that the importance of the sequence leading up to that, wherein the camera is telling us that this is a performance. We are putting on our makeup. We are putting our makeup on each other. Dee comes to finish Xiaolu's makeup as they do when they are getting ready for their scene as king and concubine. And then they arrive together into this space, into this arena that is an opera stage, really. And I think that is very beautiful, and it also recontextualizes this notion of modern opera, right? I think that there's something like kind of darkly humorous about that, right? We talk about, and we have this discourse among our characters about what is modern opera and what is its relationship to the Peking opera in its subject matter. This is that. Indeed, we have these characters exposing now their lives, and they are the lives of a sex worker and the son of a sex worker. And I think that is very interesting. That is the modern opera.
Yeah. We are watching a modern opera at the end of the day. He tricked us. Kaige tricked us.
No, well, it's interesting because this movie, in its obviously themes and literal screenplay about opera and operatic performances, is also very unafraid to act as an opera, as an incredibly high stakes drama in external to the opera sections of the movie. This movie is ostensibly only the most dramatic and serious and emotionally intense moments of these people's entire lives.
Yeah, and I love
there
how
are very few down moments in
Yes.
this movie in terms of emotion.
I also love how they are just directly aligned with like the giant, like the history book, like titling of like, and then this thing happened in Chinese history. Like literally, it's like when they free. What the night that Zhuxian and Xiaolu get married is like the night that the Japanese army invades or whatever.
Invades Beijing.
And then when they like adopt
Chinese
Jiaxi,
Forrest Gump.
in a way it is. Just as the last one, just as Underground was sort of
Yugoslavian Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Wow.
But it's when they adopt Jiaxi is like another major thing. I wrote it down somewhere. Sorry.
It's kind of a 90s thing then to be like, let's take a broad view of the 20th century through
goddamn
some
90s.
It's his 90s vibe. Like
90s end of history, neoliberal shit. Everyone was like,
All
well,
those
I
movies
guess
came out within like 4 years of each other.
Yeah, this is like that occurred to me
it's-
just now.
It's literally like the
Francis
end of history
Fukuyama.
thing. Yeah, end of history, like 90s thing where like, oh, everything seems settled. Like our president's a kind of a cool guy now. No, American president, of course, but like, like things just seem to have
Whoever
like
was
settled
the premier
culturally.
of Xi Jinping was not the premier of China in the 90s, and it was not the other guy, Deng Xiaoping, who comes after Mao, as some secret third option that I don't know.
But also, you also have to look at it like, Forrest Gump is a distinctly unique American view on that. It is very different aesthetically and tonally than what is going on in Underground and Farewell My Concubine. Has a very different view of the American events.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to posit as my biggest criticism, or at least biggest missed opportunity of this movie, is the character of Jiaxi. This child that they save, that they then come to find at the academy after Master Guan dies, and then becomes their adopted son and grows up alongside them. I think he is incredibly underserved in this narrative. The role that he serves as usurper of the role of Concubine Yu, very interesting. The role that he serves as the one of them that connects deepest to communism and then ends up interrogating them later on and being a quote unquote traitor is very interesting. And like being like their assistant, being their son, being in the opera, training alongside in the role of Concubine Yu. These are fascinating things. We don't see him that much. We don't really get to know what his thoughts are or dynamic with these characters. And I'm like, and the moment that they save that baby, I'm like, oh, here we go. Here's an interesting like third pillar of the story that then, and in a way, this is all true. It is a reflection of these characters. It is the continuation of the cycle of abuse. It represents the infiltration of communism into a family. These things are all true, but unfortunately, that character that I think is so core to so many pivotal points of the story and is like the fourth family member of that 4-person family, I don't think we get enough character work for him, enough scenes between him and these other characters to fully grasp what this person is like. He feels like a catalyst for different bits of change rather than a true character among these other three characters I think are very well realized, and we really fully understand their emotions. I never fully feel like we quite get who Jiaxi is as a member of this little family unit.
I don't
yeah,
think I agree with you that I don't find out who he is. But then I think to myself, do we need to know who he is? Or, taking our interpretation of the film as a whole, is who he is so thoroughly directed by the course of world events and events outside of his character or outside of his own choosing that he really has no sense of who he is, don't know who his parents are, was in this same abusive living growing up situation, going through the same turmoil of the opera's changing value in these societies. And so the value that then he grabs onto is the political one of being enthralled
Partially.
by the Little Red Book and,
Partially,
marching.
yes, but also then there's the moment where he is in the Concubine U makeup and performing to the mirror when the communists come and get him. And so, yes, he largely absorbs the political tenor of the time,
But he
he
still
also
keeps
obviously
this-
still has that connection to the theater.
Well, this is
Yeah.
what I wanted to point out, is that his greatest scene is the scene with Dai Yi, where Dai Yi is trying to impart, he's trying to again punish into him, impart the importance of this role and everything like that, and he resents these punishments. He resents these old style training things that Dai Yi and Xiao Luo went through. And he's like, Dai Yi commands him to kneel down before me, and then he says, "You won't live to see the day. You won't live to see the day that I bow down before you, that I kneel down before you." He is a youth in revolt in so many ways, and he serves as a mirror to Dai Yi, saying "Hey buddy, you're training me up or whatever, but you just want me in the wings, all right? You just want me as a little helper with the opera. You are not serious about me someday taking over the role of Concubine. You're not serious about that. That is your role. You view yourself in that role. That's all you think about. That is what you are obsessed with. You are not seriously considering me for that role." And so then he goes and he takes it, forces himself into that role in a way that frankly, in a way that Yi would never do. Yi is not super manipulative. He's not super underhanded in that way, in ways that Zhu Xian or Jiaoxi are. That's just not who he is. It is his it is the power and pomp and circumstance that everyone else views him in when he's playing Concubine Yu that gives him the power, that gives him the prowess of a great actor. But he is not politicking and backdoor, dealing like other characters in the film might be. And then, of course, going back to Xiaozi, yes, he is a metaphor or a stand-in for the youth of China that gets embroiled in this moment.
I also just think that, well, the film is really about Ji Yi, even in the few moments when he is not directly involved in the scene. I think about, really in particular, I'm thinking about when Xiao Lu and then Zhu Xian are making the case, and Zhu Xian, it's a great character moment, the case for persuading Yuan to free Ji Yi from prison. The film is about Ji Yi, and I think about the moment when Zhu Xian and Xiao Lo are drinking before, as Ji Yi is spying on them. And they mention that, we might as well drink out of these jade cups because we have to destroy them. They're not part of the new culture.
Yeah.
I think a very important element of this film is the way that the culture of China changes and our characters can't.
Yeah.
And I think that Jiaoxi
they are from the old system. They grew up in it. Their tendencies and habits are all from that.
And in this narrative that is so centered around Ji Yi for the overwhelming majority of the runtime, with exceptions like the scenes in the House of Blossoms, etc., the fact that we don't come to understand Jiaoxi nearly as well as we come to understand him as this figure in the foreground of this youth revolution.
Yeah, the
is-
new movement, the new culture.
Yeah, is central to his relationship to these characters. A key tenet of his relationship is that he does not relate to them. They embody a set of values and come from a time that this youth rebellion is here to completely throw away down to the teacups.
Yeah,
And so him as this almost alien presence, but in inhabiting this odd space where he is both alien and familiar, I think is important to D eventually slitting his own throat as the world that he knew no longer exists.
I want to talk about the epilogue, the end, in a moment, but I also want to say that the Jiaoxi not being essentially centered in the story is an instance of like directorial humility. Jiaoxi is essentially the Kaige's generation. He is him. He is the one that sells out his surrogate father, his adoptive father, whatever, his father, to the movement, just as Kaige did. Like it is about the director honoring the people who were lost, honoring the traditions that were attempted to be erased from the Chinese cultural history. That is what the film is concerning. It's more broadly about like the trauma that was endured because of all of this and the trauma of our characters. And to tie that directly into the epilogue, like they're now old men, but they're completely in the makeup, and you can still kind of see, obviously it's the same actors and everything. They're not doing like old man makeup, but they're, especially Zhao Luo is like affecting like an old man voice, and he's kind of like, oh, I'm too old for this stuff now or whatever, which is pretty fun. But he goes back to that same old joke, the same old thing that he like teases Jia Yi with, like, hey, you messed up the line, like, hey, stop doing that, you messed up the line, which he maybe remembers it, but it sticks in Jia Yi's memory a lot more. Like that was a severe point of abuse for him, and like the moment that codified his sexual gender identity, or maybe the confusion that he felt for his entire life, like. That tears open that wound, that decades-old wound in that final moment, and he kills himself. Like, he cannot handle being reminded of this, having this entire memory of everything that has happened, everything that has unfolded in his life, heaped onto him once again in this performance, and so he ends it. He ends it for real, just like the Concubine does in the story.
Yeah, and again, to the theatricality and the operatic nature of the broader movie, the movie is also about that larger story of the king and the concubine and not wanting to live your life without this person that you care so deeply about. And having that full circle poetic moment of the character that Jia Yi has committed his life to and that story that he has performed so many times, living that out as in the last moment of his life in the full makeup and everything. And also, what a fantastic directorial decision to make this the ending, because this is not the ending in the novel this movie is based off of. Ooh. In the novel, they just kind of go their separate ways.
I see. Tack this on.
None of them die. Zhu Shen just disappears from the narrative, and the two men meet back up later in life and talk about things, but then that's kind of it. And I think it's a very strong, cohesive directorial decision to end it in this way that, frankly, I saw coming from the first moment I realized that Jia Yi couldn't separate his life from this character. I'm like, oh,
well, we also open on it. It's a goddamn bookend,
Yeah,
of course.
And it's the question that Jia Yi asks many times is, why does the concubine have to die? And then questions this narrative in the play. And so I think it makes it more tragic knowing that he ultimately arrives at the same conclusion as the character Concubine Yu does.
Yeah, sure.
Despite many times prior, this is not just once or twice that he asks, why does this play have to end this way? And I think the film spends a half of its nearly 3-hour runtime explaining why the the play and the opera has to end so tragically, and by reaching an understanding with the audience through the character work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Movie also looks crazy good. Like we talked about the production design and everything like that, but the cinematography we also touched on. But like, goddamn, just some shots in this. I think Tucker, I believe, what was the message that you sent while you were watching it earlier today? You said
I said like, geez, there's some decent shots in this movie.
yeah, I was like, yeah, some half decent ones.
Some half decent.
No, I mean, cinematographically, I think this is one of the most striking films I've seen. It is the combination of all the production design and the lighting and cinematography. I also like to think about the way this movie creates a subtly surreal atmosphere by having the sky almost always entirely blown out with light. There are these shots of buildings, and there is the sky behind them, but it's like pure white, and it's like bleeding out over the edges of these buildings. And
also makes it feel a little bit like a stage play, that it's all just the dressing. That's just the set dressing itself.
Yeah. And then there's these moments with like big clouds, and like the light is like pouring through them in these really, really fast.
Oh yeah, I mean the light through the windows is always just like a slam dunk almost always. And yeah, this one has some of the best light through the windows. When Juxian and Jia are like sitting in two chairs in different pools of light in the prison, you're like, oh, come on now. What are you doing to me right now?
There's also this moment when they finally free Xiao Lo from the situation that he's in, when Jia Yi like performs to the Japanese army. There's this moment where they're like outside on this big like castle wall with a big staircase, and I'm like, dude, that looks like fucking Caligari. This looks like a German expressionist film.
Yeah.
Like
the
there's
staircase
these moments,
crazy, and like the way the camera moves, like it like runs with him up the staircase and things like that. It's crazy.
I'll also note that the sound design is very arresting. Also, the sonic quality of the opera being very out there, at least from what we're used to. And the traditional instruments. I really wish I knew what the name of the ones that go like boom, like with all the funny. They have all this very interesting noises.
It's called a door stopper.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
They get to use
in the house right here, actually.
Whoa.
There's also, moments of faraway thunder or artillery gunfire in the background as character.
And that had to just scratch out a moment where I'm like, oh, they sync up a kiss with a bomb dropping, and then I'm like, oh, wait, no, is it storming out? So I scratched that out and wrote thunder. I was like, I think it's both.
I think it's both. We don't need it to be one or the other. So it's just a very rich world that we get to hear all about.
Yeah, musically especially, it oscillates between these big moments of what we would consider classical orchestral score and the opera, picking opera music that they're playing, which is these percussion instruments and these boing, doing, like these things that create this really interesting atmosphere. And there's this sound, a musical instrument that sounds almost like a fly buzzing.
Oh, sure.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. We got to talk about this. It's the ringing. I think I know how it's made. It's a singing bowl, but it's not the entirety of the effect. It's being cut and manipulated, so you're really only getting like the reverberations and the resonance of it. And that, you're right, it is just like, it's like a video game. It's like going into Deadeye mode in Red Dead. It is a terrible comparison, right? But it's just and I think that one is used very specifically, that effect in this. It's very unsettling. We never go the events that follow that sound effect are almost always abusive, and that effect is played very heavily at the very beginning of the film.
Yes,
we a character will be like walking through a hallway at the school while the sound effect plays, and then we cut to the next shot, and he's getting his ass beat. Like
it is like omnipresent in that first section of the movie.
It's this it's this tone of anxiety and abuse and very, very well placed, because it sounds almost like it's part of the world. But then you're like, no, this is the movie here.
There's times where your brain just like catches it. It's like, oh, this is like still happening. Like,
and then you're like, you've been watching for 2 hours. 2 hours after the beginning of the movie, you're like, it's still here. Oh my! And you're like, oh, I don't want to see what happens next.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very well done. It's a very, very unique sound. Cool.
Yes.
Yes. Any
Cool
other
stuff.
What a
thoughts?
feature.
You got any more thoughts? Should we score it?
Let's
I'm
score
good.
it.
I'll give you some gentlemen some palm details while we're getting that pulled up
if
right
you
now.
wouldn't mind.
So, at the 1993 Cannes Film Festival, this film split the Palme d'Or with another film that we have yet to talk about, Jane Campion's The Piano. But at this film festival, the jury president
Friend of the
this
show,
year,
James Campion.
friend of the
Talked
show,
about
Jane
Power of the
Campion.
Dog.
Good point. Jury president this year was French filmmaker Louis Malle, director of such films as Elevator to the Gallows, My Dinner with Andre, etc., etc. That is not the name of the movie. I just, was filling for time.
We understand.
Oh, okay, interesting. Other members of the jury that voted for these two films to win include friend of the show, Abbas Kiarostami, friend of the show, the film we've talked about here, and a little guy by the name of Gary Oldman was on the jury this year.
Hmm.
But he was quite young back in 1993.
That's true. He was sort of a Gary
Younger,
Youngman
yeah.
back in the day.
Whoa, that's insane. Did he? What age did he change that at? Was there like a Gary Middleman?
Gary Middle-aged man.
Middle-aged
Gary
man?
middle-aged man.
Let's see here. Other
Is he part of the
films-
show? We ever seen him in one of these pictures?
He's in
Mank,
the King's
Mank,
King's
Mank.
Speech too.
Yeah.
Go, he's in King's Speech. Is he in King's Speech?
No.
No, you're mixing him up with someone.
Okay.
Are you thinking of Jeffrey Rush? Anyway, of the
I don't even remember that
21
movie.
other films in competition that did not split the Palme d'Or with these two,
He's
notable.
also an Oppenheimer. We talked about
Oh
that.
yeah, good point.
Oh sure.
Well, he just melts into the role of Harry S. Truman for me. Harry Truman, not Harry S. Truman. That's the Twin Peaks character. Anyway, other films in competition this year, and then we'll get the score. King of the Hill by Steven Soderbergh.
They made a show based on that.
Yeah, they made a show based on that.
The
Naked
Halo
by
mode
Mike
based
Lee.
on that.
Shut up.
And this one really surprised me. Falling Down by Joel Schumacher was in competition at the Cannes Film Festival. The
I don't know
movie
much about that movie.
the movie about like Michael Douglas is like a mild-mannered office worker who loses his marbles and like goes on a rampage and starts killing people in the streets of Los Angeles.
Oh.
People were just Schumacher pilled back in the day. You know, you're
Yeah,
coming
I
off of his
fucking guess
Batman movie that people fucking hated.
I guess
you know,
so. And
You're
like,
going right into the what is it? The number 43? What's the fucking number? What's that dumb
number
movie?
23.
23? Yeah,
Yeah.
that movie sucks balls.
Yeah, it's not a good movie. Anyway,
Phone booth.
Phone Booth,
What a-
classic. We're still like God, can you imagine? You're still like a decade off from Phone Booth at that point. That's so sad.
Yeah,
What a
what's the
sad
point
state
of
of
living?
affairs. Yeah.
Living in a pre-phone booth world.
God, imagine.
That's what they were like at the beginning of this movie. No
True.
phone booths at the start of Farewell,
Whoa.
Concubine. All right, Tanner, you got your score in there? Let's find out.
Yes,
what
I do.
What we get. 3, 2, 1. Calculate. Jeez.
0.9.
Wow. So we got some scores here. We got quite some scores. The average would be 9.1. Let's do some checking. 9.1's got
God.
about.
It's a 5-way tie now.
Holy
It's a
Christ.
5-way tie for 9.1. The top of the list is a 9.2, or is a 9.9 by the way. But
Yeah.
the point breakdown.
That's amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
9.9.
I don't think we're gonna get something to beat it. I thought this one might have been
Timo,
close.
why don't you give Parasite a 10? You nincompoop, you weakling.
Tanner didn't either.
Abram didn't either. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
solely
a
at
real
fault.
smear on you.
No, I gave Parasite a 10.
He did.
Yeah.
The point breakdown for Farewell, My Concubine, I gave it a 7.6. Abram gave it an 8.9, and both Tucker and Tanner gave it flat 10.0. So
Yeah.
9.1.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, to refer back to the Parasite thing for a second, it's always the calculation I have to do in my head of like, this is like a 5-star movie, but do I give it like a 9.8 or like what do I do there? Do I just give it a 10 out of 10 or is 9 a 9 to like a 9.0 to a 9.9 or is there some wiggle room
It's all
for a
good,
5-star?
buddy.
I don't know.
It's all good.
Okay, so first we're going up against a pianist.
The Pianist.
Better than
It's a
The
good
Pianist. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I would go below pianist.
You would go below a pianist?
I
Have many times.
would probably go below Pianist too.
Oh, no.
So now we're in a deadlock
Now in a fucking
situation.
stalemate. Look at this.
That leaves it to the audience. That leaves
Yeah,
it
it
to
does.
the Rainas and Stevens and Jay Galindos and John Tors
Mm-hmm.
of the
That's right.
world.
That's right.
Our 6-member
And hopefully
viewing board.
some other new viewers
Mhm.
that watch this fucking almost 2 hour long video.
We
But I suppose it can't go higher than that. Or because you guys would you guys put it above Taxi Driver?
Definitely
That's not how it works. It stops at that.
Okay,
Yeah.
stops there. Okay.
and I definitely wouldn't put it above the conversation.
Okay. Well, fair point. Fair point.
Uh,
Fair
yeah.
play.
I mean, well, given that
God,
I
there's some
gave it
great
kind
movies.
of,
Anatomy of a Fall.
I know this is it's really hard because these are all so good.
Mhm.
This discussion I found much more interesting than watching the movie, unfortunately.
Okay.
And that's why I gave it the 3/4 7.6
Oh.
score.
I think you can say that for every single movie we've ever talked about on Quest, that our discussion is better than the film itself.
Yes.
yes, especially for
Quest is better than
all-time great
Godfather.
movies like Bong Joon-ho's Parasite.
And Quest does insist upon itself. Let's be clear.
Oh, this runtime is certainly suggesting that.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Should we-
Timo,
should-
the audience is voting for Farewell My Concubine to go at either which spot.
It's
either which
either
spot or which
going
spot.
to
Doesn't
go
matter above the Pianist or not.
Yeah, but
is
I
We
want to know the
we don't need to
stakes.
haggle.
I
Yeah,
vote
the
it does
stakes-
matter.
what we want to know is, do you put Farewell My Concubine above the Pianist or below the Pianist? That's the only distinction that we will take into
No.
account, and those
No.
votes will filter in. But the score, the placement does matter. So you're vying for
Mhm.
2 spots. It's either going to
Seventh
be the
place.
8th spot or the 7th spot on the
Yeah.
list.
Mhm.
Underground, the one we talked about last time, right? One below this with an 8.9.
Yeah.
They're right next to each other on the list. But no matter what happens, Farewell My Concubine is above Underground.
True.
Okay.
Right.
It's also
So-
above Missing.
True.
Yeah.
I'm missing my
yes.
memory on that one.
That's a good movie. It's about the guy who
Good
gets
movie.
killed and they put him in the wall. And then
Well,
they're like, where did he go?
Gavras.
That's
Yeah,
yes.
it's a heater. That's
Yep.
a heater.
Good one.
Okay, audience, do your job. Do your job.
S-
Show up
That's a
to work.
serious lemon right there.
Vote.
That's a serious lemon is missing.
Stop. Okay. Can we continue?
Yes.
Vote
Sorry.
vote your choice down in the comments. Which one do you think is better? Which one is a better movie? Not which one do you like more. It's a better movie. Farewell My Concubine or The Pianist. I mean, you can write whatever you want in the comments, but this is your assignment. And then I guess it's time to spin the wheel, right? We got one more chore here.
Also,
and then
Farewell My Concubine is on the Criterion channel. So if you're a cool person and have that streaming service and you haven't seen the movie, watch it.
Yeah.
you can just go watch it.
And as I mentioned, plenty of extras.
Plenty of it. I would actually venture to guess that there's plenty of extras in the movie as well.
Police Story, also part of Criterion Collection. I've been thinking about that movie a lot recently. You should watch that too.
Yeah. Hell yeah, buddy. Timo, pull up that funky wheel.
Funky wheel, right here.
Alrighty.
Tanner, anybody got anything to like bang on to make some metallic noises while we do some operatic singing here?
I could just smack my mic around. Would that be good for the audio, Timo?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
Ooh, very good timing. 51, that's the deal. You see it, I see it. What movie
Okay.
is that going to be?
Holy Christ almighty. Well, folks, it's good that we are going into a holiday weekend to watch this one, because you might need to use some ample time here. The film that we are talking about, as you know, high up on the list, it is a more recent winner from the year 2014. I'm going to say from the director Nuri Bilge Ceylan. I'm going to look what country this is from. 1 second. Details. This is from the countries of Turkey, France, and Germany. So I presume it's a Turkish film. It's a film that stars Demet Akbag, Melissa Sozen, and Haluk Billinger. This is the film Winter Sleep. Does anyone want to take a stab at the running time of Winter Sleep?
3 hours and 10 minutes.
Yeah, 3 hours and 30 minutes.
It is 196 minutes.
A
So that
normal
is
person time?
3
How long is
hours,
that?
just under 320.
Yeah. 360.
Okay.
I didn't
What's
win
it
on
about?
Price is Right rules.
What is it about, Team Abram? I'm glad you asked. Aydin is a hotel owner and a retired actor in rural Turkey. As winter emerges, he begins navigating the conflicts within the relationships with his wife, sister, and existence.
What if instead we
okay.
watched Winter's Bone?
Ooh, Winter's Bone. Okay. Well, we'll consider it, but I think we're gonna lean towards watching Winter's Sleep.
You know, I don't think it's a good idea to disobey the spin wheel. Bad
True.
things happen
Yeah,
when we
well-
do that.
Also want to
And-
point
and-
out. Yeah, I also want to point out that I think this is the longest Palme d'Or winner.
Okay.
Really? Okay.
Okay.
It's all downhill from here, folks.
That's right.
It's all shorter from here. Well,
It is.
this will be interesting. A little bit more world cinema. The reason why we do this show, to watch things that aren't from America. And I mean, have we seen any Turkish films before on the list?
Yol,
Is
right?
Yol, the
Yol,
Road.
I think that was Turkish. Yeah.
Right. And so
Here.
that was much earlier. That was a 70s film, right? Late 70s?
I think so. And I think that was in early 80s.
Early 80s. Okay, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
For our limited comparison that we can make, we can compare what filmmaking in the early 80s and the early 10s is like for Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Sure. Well,
Sure.
you know, who knows? Who knows? Things change, as we saw in this movie.
Also shout out Haluk Billinger, the main actor in this, in 2018's Halloween as well. Just looking him up. It's crazy
Okay.
that one's at the top of
That's a
his
good
film
movie.
log. Yeah.
I am looking forward to watching this one. I'm going to set aside some time and sit down
Yes.
and enjoy it in its fullest. Thank you guys for talking about Farewell, My Concubine and enlightening me a little bit. I feel enlightened about this film now.
Good.
And, well, I don't really got anything else. So we'll talk about Winter Sleep next time. Until then, stay cool, keep warm. Peace.